G'day Gear Junkies, Jason here. I'm both a collector and an amateur historian of the company Boss. I've documented the history and development of Boss's compact pedal line over the last couple of years in this series of videos. I've determined through my research that there has been 5 definitive eras when it comes to Boss's compact pedal line. They are the Japanese era Part 1, or the early years, the Japanese era Part 2, or the uniform years. There's the tweakability/functionality era, and now we're up to the digital era. And the most recent era is the retrospective era. But before I begin, if you like this kind of content, please subscribe. And if you want to support this channel, you can go to the Middle Age Gear Junkie store and purchase some merchandise. Or you could support me through Patreon, where I'm uploading additional content, including extended videos like the one I'm going to do of this video. The links are in the description below. Thanks for the support. Personally, I think that the digital era is Boss's easiest era to define. There's a move away from analog circuits, and we'll see they replace a lot of traditional analog circuits, and they even convert a couple of their pedals from analog to digital during this time. I can only imagine that this was a cost-cutting measure by Boss. By this stage, mass-producing printed circuit boards was a lot cheaper than it had been in the past, and by moving into this direction, they were able to mass-produce a lot more pedals, probably cheaper, and the profit margins would have been higher. There are pros and cons when it comes to digital. As you'll see, there'll be a lot of very handy new features on some of these pedals, but at the same time, they lose a bit of their character. In 2000, Boss released the PH3. This would replace the long-running PH2, which came out in 1984. The PH2 has 2 modes. It has a 10 and a 12-stage mode. The PH3, however, has 7 different modes. All the other controls are still the same. We just have more modes to choose from. It also has tap tempo, so by holding down the foot switch for a couple of seconds, you can tap in your tempo. And you can also plug in an expression pedal, and you can use that to manipulate the rate, as I'll demonstrate with this example. That was recorded using the Rise mode. Now, the very first video that I did looking at a series of pedals was the PH series. And in that video, I compared all of its predecessors to the PH3. And what I found was that when I turned on the PH3, it actually sucked a bit of the tone. There was a definite volume drop every time I turned it on, which wasn't the case with the older pedals. This pedal gives you 4, 8, 10 and 12 stage phasing, as well as rise mode, 4 mode, and step mode. Step mode is kind of like this arpeggiated phaser thing. It's really cool, sounds really robotic, but I've never been able to use it in a song. However, I did do a video a few years ago where I used this and a couple of other pedals and came up with some really cool robot sounds. The PH3 is still available today. That same year, they'd bring out the AW3 dynamic wah. This replaced the AW2 auto wah, which went out of production the year before. This pedal has the distinction of being the first Boss pedal to have separate inputs for bass and guitar. So this was kind of a smart move by Boss because it meant that they didn't have to produce 2 separate pedals. You could use this on either guitar or bass, and this would reduce their inventory. This actually marked a bit of a decline in the amount of bass-specific pedals that Boss would bring out. In fact, in this whole era, they only brought out 1 pedal that was specifically designed for bass. This pedal has 5 different modes. It has up, down, sharp, humanizer, which is a kind of human voice simulation, and tempo mode. Now, up until this point, tap tempo was invented for the Boss DD5, so it was really envisaged to be used with delay, but Boss started to redeploy that technology to use it on modulation pedals, and I think that was a really cool idea. I've looked at this pedal and this series in more depth in another video if you're interested. The Boss AW3 is still in production today. In 2001, Boss released what would be their only analog pedal in this entire generation of Boss pedals. It was the MD2 Mega Distortion. There's a lot written online about this pedal being designed and marketed at nu metal players, and I actually believe that. Nu metal, particularly bands like Korn, had a really thick, undefined sound, which was known as the mud tone. It had a lot of bottom end due to the fact that they were using 7-string guitars, but they were also using rectifier amplifiers. So this pedal here, it gives you a tone control, but then it's also got a bottom control for extra bottom end that you can wind in to make it really thick and, well, muddy. It has a distortion control, but it also has a gain boost control on top of that. In the Boss book, it says that this was the highest gain pedal up until that point that they'd ever made. Personally, I think the Mega Distortion is one of the better distortion pedals that Boss have ever brought out, and it's still available today. In November of 2001, Boss would take both the CH1 chorus and the CE5 chorus ensemble and convert these to digital. So all of the units that have been produced since then are actually digital, not analog. I own the analog and digital versions of these pedals. I'm actually going to shoot them out in the extended version of this video. In 2002, Boss replaced the long-running and much-loved BF2 with the BF3. The BF3 has all of the same controls as the BF2, except it adds a mode selector. It has standard mode, which is supposed to be the same as the BF2. It has ultra mode, which is supposed to be the same as the HF2 high band flanger. Then it has panning mode, which works in stereo, so this has stereo outputs. And it also has momentary mode, where it only comes on when you hold down the foot switch. This is the second Boss pedal to feature the bass input, which means that they were able to retire the long-running bass flanger. This pedal also has tap tempo, which can be accessed by holding down the foot switch for 2 seconds, and it can be used on any of the modes. I recently did a video about the BF series of pedals, and I got a lot of comments in that video telling me how much people love the BF3, because I mentioned in that video that there just didn't seem to be as much love out there for this as there was for the classic old BF2. In fact, I could only find one famous guitar player known to use this pedal, which is the Eagles' Joe Walsh. The BF3 is still being manufactured today. In 1995, Boss would release a revolutionary pedal which, at the time it came out, I don't think people understood or appreciated how important it was. It was the Boss DD5 digital delay. This was the first pedal ever to feature tap tempo. But to access the tap tempo, you had to put it into tempo mode and then attach an external foot switch to tap in the tempo. Fast forward to 2002 and this gets replaced with the DD6. Now, like the modulation pedals we've already looked at, to access the tempo on this pedal, all you have to do is hold down the foot switch for 2 seconds and then tap in the tempo using the inbuilt foot switch. The DD6 was only the second Boss pedal after the tremolo panner to give you stereo in and stereo out. Up until this point, if you wanted to use your beautiful stereo chorus with delay, you had to have 2 delay pedals because Boss didn't have two inputs on any of their other delay models. This is the first in that regard. So the modes, we have a bunch of different delay ranges, just like all of the other DD pedals up until this point. It also has hold mode, again, which was a standard thing right from the DD2 up until this point as well. It has reverse mode, which was also featured on the DD5, but it also has warp mode. At the time this pedal came out, other companies, most notably Line 6, were bringing out what we call Swiss Army knife delays. They were delays that had all these other different modes like digital, tape, analog, reverse, and all these other really cool modes as well. And the Boss DD6 just really comes across as sort of half-hearted compared to that. It just doesn't have the amount of features as some of those other delay pedals were coming out with. So they kind of dropped the ball on this one a little bit, and as a result, the DD6 only remained in production through to 2008. Later that year, they brought out the RV5, which replaced the old RV3. Now, I've done a video about this series of pedals in which I explain that another aspect of the digital era is a streamlining of their pedals. So the RV3, for example, has 11 different modes, whereas the RV5 only has 6 different modes. But I feel as though what they've done is they've stripped it back and concentrated more on the algorithms for each reverb mode on this pedal. This pedal features plate, hall, room, gated, and modulated reverb modes, as well as being the first of their reverb pedals to feature a spring reverb mode. Now, it's not my favorite spring reverb. In fact, Boss would come up with a spring reverb in the next few years that is definitely a big step up from this, but it was their first attempt at a spring reverb. The RV5 was replaced in 2015 by the RV6. In 2003, Boss replaced another one of their long-running and much-loved pedals, which was the OC2, with the OC3 Super Octave. The OC2 is one of those pedals that is so bad that it's good. It had this glitchiness to it. It changed the waveform of your signal as well, which gave it a completely different sound. So it was much loved by certain guitar players and also a lot of bass players. The OC3, though, is a very different beast. So this doesn't have that glitchiness. It is a much more precise tracking pedal than the OC2 due to it being digital. This pedal has 3 modes. The first one is called drive mode, which adds like this really thick fuzz to your tone, which actually sounds kind of good on bass, and it gives you this sub-octave sound. Mode 2 is called oct2, which gives you 2 octaves, an octave below and 2 octaves below. The third mode, which is poly mode, is probably the secret sauce of this pedal. This was quite popular amongst acoustic guitar players. So if you're just playing solo acoustic and you want to thicken up your sound, what you could do is put it into poly mode and you lose the second sub-octave, and it turns the third control into a range control or like a cutoff control. So you can dial it in so that it doesn't play an octave on every note of your chord. You can dial it in to play just the lowest note of each chord like a bass would. So it can kind of sound like that there is a bass guitar playing along with your acoustic guitar. The OC3 was retired in 2020 when it was superseded by the OC5. However, I would have to say that this is one of my favorite pedals from this entire generation. I think they did a really great job with this, and it featured some ideas that they would then use again in the newer OC5. In 2004, Boss would release their only bass pedal of this generation, which was the SYB bass synthesizer. This would replace the SYB3, which came out in the mid-90s. Now, I am going to look at their bass pedals, but I'm going to do a specific video about all of their bass pedals, so I'm not going to look at that one today. In 2005, Boss released the AC3 acoustic simulator. This was an upgraded version of the AC2 acoustic simulator that came out in the late 90s. From the outside, the AC3 looks almost exactly the same as the AC2. It has all of the same modes, it has all of the same controls. It does, however, add a digital reverb on this concentric pot on the end. But it also has the COSM badge. COSM was Roland's digital modeling division. And if you have a look at a lot of the Roland cube amps that came out from the mid-2000s that were digital, they used this COSM technology to model all sorts of different amplifiers and effects. And we see this start to filter into some of the Boss pedals that would come out from this period onwards. So I refer to this pedal as the acoustic-ish simulator. I don't think it sounds realistic enough to my ear to ever warrant not bringing an acoustic guitar to a gig, even for one song. But there are a lot of people out there who like it. I think it's best used when you blend it just right with your dry signal, and so it just thickens up your sound a little bit and makes it sound like there's an acoustic guitar in the mix. In 2004, Digitech took the guitar world by storm with their Jam Man looper pedal. This was super easy to use and was very popular amongst guitarists. 2 years later, in 2006, Boss decided to get in on this action, and they released their first looper, which was the RC2 Loop Station. The controls on this pedal are instrument level and drum machine level, because this has a built-in drum machine. You can cycle through it with the second control here, which has about 11 different drum phrases that it has. And then on the end we have a mode selector. This has things like write mode, record mode, delete mode. It has different beat divisions and things like that. And then we have a select button in here, which helps you to select any of the modes that you're working in, but also you can use it as a tap tempo function as well. As a looper, it works okay. You can record, you can overdub, but you can't save any of your loops like you could on the pedals that came after this. So if you wanted to create like a collection of loops that you wanted to use live, you can't really do that with this. In 2007, Boss released the ML2 Metalcore. This is the only digital metal pedal that they've ever released. I featured this recently on a video about all of their metal pedals, which I think was one of the best videos that I've ever done. Metalcore is a tighter, more modern sounding distortion than any of their other metal distortions that came out prior to this. It's a lot easier to set up than, say, the Metal Zone. The EQ controls can be fairly powerful, so you don't want to run the low control too high because it's quite booming in that bottom end and gets very, very thick. So play with caution with that. Same with the high control. I think they're both voiced quite well compared to, say, the HM2, which is very, very extreme as soon as you start turning them up. So I think this is a fairly well balanced pedal and still stacks up pretty well today. That year they released the successor to the short-lived FZ3, which was the FZ5. This was the second pedal to use their Cosm technology. They used their modeling technology to model 3 classic fuzzes from the 1970s. The pot in the middle is a 3-way mode selector. They are F, M, and O. F stands for fuzz face, M stands for Maestro FZ1A, and O stands for Octavia. I didn't know what to think about playing a digital fuzz when I first got this pedal, but I was actually kind of surprised with the quality of the sounds. It does actually sound pretty good. Michael Banfield reckons that this is a very underrated pedal and a bit of a sleeper, so his word's good enough for me. And as far as I know, this pedal is still available today. Also in 2007, they brought out their very first digital overdrive pedal, which was the DN2 Dyna Drive. The idea behind this pedal is that it's supposed to be a very touch responsive overdrive, so if you pick really lightly, it cleans right up, and if you dig in, it gets dirtier. According to Boss's website, they used the technology from one of their Roland Cube amps in this pedal. The Dyna Drive was only made till 2013, and it was a bit of a sleeper pedal there for a while, but in recent years people have kind of woken up to the fact that it is a pretty decent overdrive, and as a result in the last 2 years they're pretty much doubled in value on the second-hand market. 2007 must have been a really busy year at Boss, because they also released the first 2 of their collaboration project with Fender, which was the 59 Bassman and the 65 Deluxe. These are both amp in a box pedals that were made using their Cosm technology. The 59 Bassman pedal has a 4-band EQ. It's got bass, middle, and treble, as well as presence, and you've got separate level and gain controls. It also has a separate input for bright in and normal, just like it would on an old Fender amplifier. These pedals do not have a speaker simulator though, so they are not really designed to go straight into a PA. They are designed to go into an amplifier. On the 65 Deluxe, you get treble and bass, gain and level, and you also get reverb and tremolo. Now, the tremolo only has a single control, which is depth, so you have to, if you don't want it at all, turn it all the way down. But if you want to use the trem, you actually have to hold down the foot switch for 2 seconds, and that will activate the tap tempo, and you can then tap in how fast you want that tremolo speed to go. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to do an episode on all of the Fender pedals. In 2008, Boss replaced the DD6 with the DD7. The DD7 was the first of their digital delays to have an analog mode. So it's a digital version of analog, but it's analog sounding. Now, analog delay is great because it doesn't get in the way of your playing because it has reduced top end clarity. It sort of does its thing in the background and just creates a bit of atmosphere. This pedal also has a modulated delay mode. When it comes to the development of delay, it's very interesting to note that digital was kind of like the summit of the mountain. Engineers had spent a long time from the earliest days of tape echo to try and make the echo sound as close to the original guitar signal as possible, and they finally achieve it with digital. And as digital improved, it pretty much was an exact copy of the guitarist's signal. Then, once at its peak, people went backwards and went, you know what? I actually like analog. I actually like the imperfections of tape and other styles of delay. And Boss were very, very late to realize this. Line 6 brought out the DL4 in 1999, and about the same time this pedal came out, they brought out the Echo Park, which was similar to the DL4 but in a single stomp format, and it had way more options than this pedal. It was a much better delay pedal, in my opinion, than the DD7. So for the second digital delay in a row, I think Boss missed an opportunity to fill this with other delay modes other than just mainly digital modes. In 2009, Boss bring out the TU3 to replace the TU2. Now, a couple of improvements on this pedal over its predecessor are that it's got a better display and the display is brighter, and it's also more accurate than its predecessor as well. For those people who like their tuner to be on the whole time while they're playing, if you go out of bypass mode, the tuner is always doing its job. You don't have to hit the foot switch to engage it. With the global financial crisis in full swing in 2009, it was a very odd time to release probably one of their most collectible pedals that they've ever brought out, which was the FRV1 63 Fender reverb. This is the third and final pedal they brought out in their collaboration with Fender. Once again, they used their Cosm technology to emulate the sound of a 1963 Deluxe reverb tank. And I've got to say, I think this sounds absolutely amazing. Now, as you've probably heard me say, I'm not a fan of digital representations of spring reverb. I think spring reverb is one of the hardest reverb sounds to get right. And this was probably one of the earliest digital spring reverbs to really get it right. They give you 3 controls, which are mixer, dwell, and tone, and you can really tweak these controls to get a really, if you want, dark sounding reverb, or you can make it sound a bit more twangy using that tone control, and they give you plenty of reverb time as well. Yeah, this one is super impressive and definitely a collector's item. In 2010, they brought out the successor to the PS5 Super Pitch Shifter, which was the PS6 Harmonist. This pedal gives you a bunch of different options. So we've got harmony, pitch shift, detune modes, and we've also got whammy modes. So you can use the inbuilt foot switch here as a kind of whammy pedal, and then you can set the parameters on here to control the rise and fall time of your whammy. Unlike the PS5, this can do 3-part harmonies, a bit like the old HR2 harmonist that came out in the mid-90s. However, this is a more precise pedal than that one. Also, the original harmonist pedal didn't give you every key signature to work with. This one does, so you can work in any key. It does have a bit of noticeable latency, I find. I have covered this pedal in more detail in a video about all of their pitch shift pedals. And of course, not long after I released that video, Boss released their newest pitch shift pedals. So I'm going to have to get a hold of that and update that video. At this point in time, the PS6 is still in Boss's catalog, but I would imagine it'll probably get decommissioned very soon. That same year, they brought out the ST2 Power Stack. Now, they may never admit this, but this is their version of a Marshall on a box. But it's got a bit of a strange layout when it comes to the controls. So we've got level, and then we've got high and low EQ. And the one on the end says sound. And it has 3 different ranges. So we've got the crunch range, then the drive range, then ultra gain. So with it all the way up, you get that ultra gain, really high gain sound, but it's also very bitey sounding as well. Personally, I think this sounds better when you back the gain off a bit. I do think this sounds a bit like a Marshall. However, this is a bit of a crowded space. There are so many brands doing their version of a Marshall in a box, including Marshall themselves. So as a result, you can pick these up on the secondhand market pretty cheap. And I think they're still being made today. In 2011, Boss replaced the RC2 with the RC3. The RC3 here has a much more stripped back layout. So we've only got the 2 controls, which are for your instrument level and the drum loop level. We have separate controls on here for the drum loops so that you can go through them with relative ease compared to the other pedal. We have a button for tap tempo, but I think the most handy thing about this pedal is the fact that we have 99 memory slots. So you can save your loops. So instead of making them every show, if you wanted to use a looper, you can just scroll through them. You can plug in an external foot switch to scroll through them, or you can fill those memory slots with backing tracks. For me, the RC3 was a welcome upgrade to the RC2. By 2011, Boss had a Marshall in a box, they had a couple of Fender in a box pedals, so it was only a matter of time before they came out with a Vox in a box. The BC2 combo drive has the same controls as the ST2 Power Stack that came before it, so we've got level, treble and bass, and then we have our gain range on the end. The only difference is that it goes from clean to crunch and then drive, but the drive is pretty saturated. Personally, I think this sounds better when you wind the gain down a bit and it's just a bit crunchy. The BC2 never sold as well as the Power Stack, and as a result it was taken out of their catalogue in 2019. But it's developed a bit of a following amongst Boss fans, and these have pretty much doubled in value in the last few years. You won't find one for under about 200 Australian dollars. Also in 2011, Boss brought out one of their most collectible pedals from this whole period, which was the FB2 Feedbacker Booster. Now, I started a new series of videos which look at one-off pedals that didn't belong to any particular series. And in the very first episode of that new series, I featured this pedal. So this pedal gives us boost level, feedback, tone, and character. So I'll get to the feedback in a second, but the character knob is interesting because it gives you different types of boosts. So with it all the way down, it's a flat boost. So doesn't give you any sort of accentuated parts of your signal. Halfway up, it's kind of like a bit of a mid bump. And then if you turn it all the way up, it's quite a pronounced mid hump. The feedback function on this pedal works in a similar way to the old DF2 feedbacker and distortion. So you just hold down the foot switch and you get this infinite sustain. Because this pedal wasn't part of a series and it was only made till 2015, it's become one of their more collectible pedals that they've put out in recent times. In 2012, Boss didn't actually release any new pedals. In 2013, though, they brought out their 100th new model from the compact pedal line, and that distinction went to the TE2 Terra Echo. This pedal really was something different, and I think it was something very refreshing from Boss. So when I first saw this, I just thought it was an echo pedal, maybe a tape delay type thing. It is not even close to that. It's part echo, it's part filter, it's part synth. It's all of these things sort of rolled into one. The best way I can describe it is it's a synth pad delay. The way it works is the harder you play, the more it activates that sort of arpeggiated synth sound that it has. Now, unlike most of their pedals, this is not really aimed at rockers, metal players, or blues guys. It really is aimed at people who are into playing sort of shoegaze, atmospheric type stuff, or even praise and worship. So it's really great for just creating these sort of pads of spatial sounds that you can kind of just paint over with other sounds as well. So yeah, definitely a very, very original pedal, and I think this was definitely worthy of being the 100th Boss pedal. They brought out another pedal that same year that pretty much had the same market, which was the MO2 multi-overtone. So basically it modulates pitch, it kind of gets Leslie kind of sounds, vibrato, it really is a bit of a mishmash, detune, all these sorts of things. It really is an effect that is designed to add color to your tone. You really need to play to the effect, so play less and let the effect kind of take over. though these aren't really effects that I would normally use, I really like the fact that Boss went out of their way to create things that were totally different and unique on the pedal market. And as a result, these two pedals are still being made today. The last pedal of 2013, and indeed the digital era, was the DA2 Adaptive Distortion. What makes this distortion pedal different from most other distortion pedals is that it divides your signal up in the frequency bandwidth and distorts different parts of the signals different amounts. So it's not like it just adds a distortion to your entire tone. It distorts part of the signal more than others to give you a more precise sound. The Adaptive Distortion was one of the shortest lived pedals that Boss ever made. It was discontinued the following year in 2014. So as a result, these command quite a price on the secondhand market, and they're fairly rare. To be honest, it is one of my favorite distortion pedals that they've ever brought out. I did a video looking at all of their orange distortion pedals, including this one, and I think out of all of those, this was probably my favorite. 2014 would see a shift in Boss pedal design where they looked more at the past for ideas for the future. And this led to the Wazacraft line, but also several other pedals like their Space Echo and such pedals, which really did look to the past for ideas for their future. I'm not alone in thinking this was probably the lowest point in Boss's history. Josh Scott actually referred to this period as the dark years of Boss. Now, admittedly, they actually did bring out some really good pedals at this time, but they just didn't have the same soul and the same character as a lot of their pedals from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So for me, I just don't look as fondly at these pedals as I do with some of their older pedals. But hey, that's just my opinion. As always, I want to know your opinion, so please leave a comment and tell me which of these pedals that you've owned and really loved, and maybe if you didn't love them, I want to know about that as well. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. Remember, you can support this channel by going to the Middle Age Gear Junkie store and purchasing some merchandise, or you can support me through Patreon, where I'm uploading additional content, including an extended version of this video. Other than that, my name is Jason. Have a wonderful day. See you later.